Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very meaningful Juneteenth. We are in webinar format today, so if you please go ahead and introduce yourselves on the chat, I'd appreciate it. And let me go ahead and tell you guys what Purse Power is all about, just in case you're not familiar. Purse Power is working to help women use their massive purchasing power to drive positive change. We are all about women helping women. And the purpose of these calls is to really connect you guys with each other so that we can support each other, share best practices, share our knowledge, share connections, etc. Normally we do have meetings that are very interactive. Today, given the number of participants, we're going to go ahead and do this as a webinar. And I just quickly want to shout out some of our special guests. I've got Tatiana Bonafoy, who's our board chair, Linda Hanneborg on our board of advisors, Jan Peary's a director, and Karen Nerns, a co-founder, my sister and director. And then I think I've got a few of our shareholders on, and they're the ones making this a reality. So I've got Debbie Fleming, Jean Kelly, John Davis, Lynn Harden, Sandra Nafee, and Valerie Nafee, I believe, on the call. Okay, so why don't we go ahead, and I'm going to introduce Scott Omelianuk. I practice saying his name. Share your comments as we talk via the chat, and then ask questions by clicking on the questions link on your control bar. And please do write them down as we go, and we'll ask for them a little later in the program. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce Scott. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today, Scott. You're amazing. I heard him on another webinar speaking about the economic power of women, and he sounded very supportive of women in general and women entrepreneurs. So I reached out to him and asked him to join us. As the editor-in-chief of Inc. magazine, Scott is leading the organization through one of the most tumultuous times in recent memory. Businesses look to Inc. to give them guidance and support in these chaotic times. In addition to being an author, investor, founder, and patent holder, Scott has been an expert source or contributor for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Ad Age, Adweek, Fast Company Magazine, another one of my favorites, CNN, the BBC, NHK, NPR, CNBC, MSNBC, and dozens of other newspapers, blogs, and broadcast outlets around the world. When reading Scott's bio, I found it fun to learn that he was on the creative team for the Real Housewives franchise and was the managing director of the iconic This Old House program. Scott is also on the advisory board of the MIT Enterprise Forum and acts as the entrepreneur in residence and as an instructor for the Stevens Institute of Technology, which is a U.S. News and World Report Top 25 Innovation School. Scott's entrepreneurial experience is as impressive as it is wide-ranging. I'm confident he has incredible insights to share with us today, and I'm so pleased he's here. Thank you very much for joining us, Scott.
My pleasure, Donna. You recorded that, right? Because that was great. I need to use that again.
That intro. Okay, sure.
Thanks very much.
All right. All right, to begin, I know that we all want to learn more about you. So I'd like for you to tell us your story. Where did you start, and how did you arrive at this place in your life and career?
Yeah, you know, I think as most people, I think, don't exactly have a lot of direction, right, in life, or at least I didn't. And I started my career, actually started college bumbling around. I was every major you could conceive of, and ended up a political science major because that was the fastest way out the door in 4 years. I worked as a carpenter. I worked as a garbage man. I realized that I didn't think either were good long-term careers for me. It's interesting. One of the things I like to talk about is having role models, or at least seeing ways forward, right? And in the world I grew up in, like, I actually couldn't see past when I was working as a carpenter, the idea that I would be 60 years old and out in January on a ladder on the side of a building, right? There was no understanding in my own head that, well, no, you actually could become the contractor who owns the business, right? So I didn't get that. And on a whim, I went to graduate school in journalism. It was actually suggested to me, one of the majors I was in college was a studio art major. I had a lovely art history professor who, her name is Carol Small, and to this day, I thank her for telling me, Scott, you're a better writer than you are a painter. Maybe you should think about that. and I did, and I went to graduate school and entered journalism from there. And I worked at places like GQ and Esquire when those things were important, more important in our culture, I think, than they are today. I left Esquire for a television opportunity, which led to joining the folks. And I apologize to everyone for having had a hand in creating the Real Housewives franchise, because I think it's been not great for our culture. To be properly punished for it, it was a work for hire, and we were dismissed after the first season. And the intellectual property which we created went on to Bravo owned, and they gave it to another production company. And that is when I returned to sort of more traditional media with that television experience to run This Old House, the television show that's been on PBS for 40 years now.
Wow.
I wasn't there at the start, but it has been on that long.
Amazing.
Somehow all my experiences coalesced there, right? The fact that I had worked as a carpenter was useful.
Right.
The fact that I had worked in television was useful. The fact that I had been in magazines, because there was also a magazine and a website, was useful. So I think it's an interesting little lesson in how a really set of seemingly diverse and unconnected experiences can influence where you go. And then from there, we built that brand up even more than it was. It was ultimately sold to a company, and I departed then. And I went into academia and started teaching in a business school and consulting, and using the idea that, media was one of the first businesses that was really disrupted by the digital world. And we figured it out and used all of the tools that digital technology provided us to be a better brand rather than fight against it. And so I set up a consultancy helping other businesses navigate that world. And again, in a weird set of circumstances, teaching in a business school, I was teaching innovation and entrepreneurship. I was teaching marketing, having also worked as a founder, which is a story we don't have to get into today, but I created a patent for a business that still exists. And having that consultancy sort of made me a really good person to lead Inc., which was all about all of those things.
Right.
So that's sort of how it happened. One continuous accident, I think I would describe it as.
Well, that's wonderful how it all was additive and got you where you are. It's wonderful.
But I think we need to think about that as people, right? Is that our experiences may seem disconnected, they may seem unrelated, but there's often, and this is something I think we'll talk about in a little bit with respect to brand purpose, there's a personal purpose that somehow works its way through all of them to get you to where you should be.
Right. Very good. Very good. All right. We're in a rough environment today. Tell me what you think the biggest challenges are for leaders right now.
Yeah, I do. We don't have enough time, right? It's so astonishing. I think, obviously, and I've been talking about this with people, how in some respects, crises bring their own issues, but they also elevate or escalate change that already sort of already bubbling up in the culture, right? And so I think when it comes to leadership right now, they're sort of understanding conscious capitalism, understanding having a brand purpose, having a social responsibility. I think all of these things have been escalated by the crises we're in. Understanding that our employees are human beings. And I think one of the things webinars like this, and as we saw before we got started, when my son kept trying to poke his head onto the screen, is that, we're not just sort of these robots at work. We're human beings who have lives and families and other concerns. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's at once a challenge for leaders, but also a really good thing to see and to think about. And so juggling those things, juggling workers as human beings, dealing with issues of equity and diversity and privilege and all of that stuff, I think are all sort of confronting leadership now. And I think it requires a new way of leading, right? The sort of traditional top-down management is no longer effective. I think you need to have people under you deputies who are empowered to act on your behalf, a team that actually can act independently of you. There's sort of a philosophy of management that came out of the military by General Stanley McChrystal, in a book of his called A Team of Teams. And basically it's the idea that there might be a hierarchy here. There might be someone at the top, but information is moving too fast. Situations are changing too quickly. Communication might not be effective. And I say that as we're communicating or in an email or a Slack channel or whatever. And so we need to be a team of teams and be able to act independently of each other and only escalate problems when they're really unsolvable on the team level. And I think all of those things are something leaders need to think about. And then finally, I think leaders really need to think about themselves and taking some time for self-care. I know that I can work right now 18 hours a day without a problem. And the other 6 hours worry about the problems I didn't take care of in the prior 18. At a certain point, that makes us very ineffective. And I think it's important to remember that we're only people too, and that we need to take some time out to restore ourselves, whatever that is, sort of the mental health day, meditation, a drink, if that's your thing, what exercise. My son told me last night, he's a curious little guy. He's only 9, but he said, Dad, I think everyone needs their support thing right now. And he held up this stuffed animal that he's had from when he was a kid. And he's like, Duncan's my support thing. I think your bicycle is your support thing. So every night I try to go out and ride for an hour just to, and it's true. And I think we all need that, whatever that is, because as leaders, we carry an enormous burden, a burden of expectation, a burden of meeting payroll, a burden of iterating faster than our competition, whatever it is. And you need an outlet for that.
Very insightful. That's very insightful. Yep. All right. So what do you think are the most important characteristics that leaders have right now? So especially entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think so. I think empathy is incredibly important. And I think we just have to be remarkably understanding of the circumstances we're in and the people we're working with, and the idea that your issues and your business's issues might not be the primary issue for them on any given day. I think we need to be empathetic toward our customers, whoever they are, and understand that we don't have a relationship with them just because they bought from us or whatever in the past, right? We have to have a deeper relationship with them. I think understanding the situation that other people are in is really important and one of the keys for leaders to move forward right now. I can't overstate that enough. I think being empathetic, still being able to make decisions, still being able to tell someone no when you believe, or your counsel and you believe that it's not right. But I think you still need to have the strength, but you need to sort of have the understanding, and then the EQ, right, to communicate that in the right way. Something, by the way, that women traditionally have more of or better of than men do, right? At least traditionally and stereotypically.
Right. It's interesting that you say that, because that's exactly what I was thinking as you were speaking, is that may be an advantage that women leaders actually have, perhaps, right now.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. And I think, one of the things that needs to change to take better advantage of that, obviously, is representation in leadership of women, right? When we look at the Fortune 500, and it's sort of a group that Inc. doesn't deal with, we deal with small and medium businesses, not the biggest businesses, but the representation of women in the boardroom is just not enough. And so the decision-making just considers the wrong things sometimes.
Couldn't agree with you more. That's a big part of what we're trying to do, is send revenue to the companies that actually do support women and do have women in leadership. All right. I did reach out to you because I perceived you as being very supportive of women. Can you tell me which women leaders you admire most and why?
So I could tick off a whole bunch of famous folks, right? And I think they'd all be worth it. I think, you know, you read Michelle Obama's book and it's incredibly inspiring. I think Hillary Clinton has accomplished an enormous amount. I think of someone like Indra Nooyi, who ran PepsiCo, is remarkable. Mary Barra, they're all remarkable. But there's sort of, for most of us, they're way up here. You know, and they're great to see, but we can learn lessons closer to home and among more ordinary people. And I think this gets back to what I was trying to say before about finding the role model or the understanding or the pattern that allows you to go from a carpenter to someone running this old house or running the carpentry business, right? And I think there are people we should all look to much closer to home who are doing things. My grandmother was a remarkable inspiration for me. One, because she's an incredibly smart woman who, you know, in the 20s went to college when most women did not at the age of 15, and was tough in the way that the greatest generation folks are supposed to be tough, and just you know, rolled through life in a way that was remarkable, raising 5 children, you know, which again, I can't imagine raising 5 children without washing machines, all those diapers, right?
Right.
She survived a day-long brain surgery and took herself out onto a golf course after that because she always wanted to play golf. One of the last times I saw her, she was on the roof of her house cleaning out her gutters. She just decided nothing should be beyond her reach, right? And I think there are people like that all around us who are much more credible examples for all of us and much more daily inspiration than taking the time and looking at that one truly exceptional person. There are lots of exceptional people around us, and to recognize them and to learn from them is really useful.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. All right, so you've dealt with entrepreneurs of all kinds. You've taught entrepreneurs of all kinds. Do you have any specific insights and suggestions for female entrepreneurs?
You know, I think yes. I think there are a couple of things, right? One is that unfortunately, you need to be more resilient than your male counterparts because you're going to be told no more often. I don't think that's right, but I think those are circumstances. We know that women, for example, receive a fraction, and when I say fraction, I mean a few % of the funding on the VC level that male-led companies do, right? So I think all entrepreneurs have resiliency. That is more important than anything when you're a woman entrepreneur. I think having the right amount of self-doubt is okay, but not doubting yourself is wrong, right? You have to believe in yourself. I think all entrepreneurs, again, you know, they have a set of skills that have gotten them to a place. And this is the thing we talk about a lot with respect to where we are right now with a broken economy. It's like, you know, you had an idea, you were resourceful, you figured out how to put that idea in motion in a way that people believed in. You figured out either how to get financing or how to bootstrap it, right? Now the world has changed on you and your business might suddenly be in jeopardy, but you still have those set of, so your business might not be what it was. You don't have that anymore, but you have a set of skills that got you to where that business was. And you have to remember that they're there and to tap back into them. Right. And to make sure, like, I am a creative person. Yes, I am a determined person. Yes, I can get through this by thinking about it the right way, by taking counsel with the right people and making the right moves. We have, and I think this is true more broadly, we have the ability, and I say this without having done it at all myself, but we have the ability to be more directed in how our life turns out, you know, to some extent. And by making the right choices and remembering how we got to where we are. And I think that's really important for entrepreneurs in general and women entrepreneurs in particular.
You know, it's interesting. I've thought about that. I've thought that entrepreneurs actually have an edge in terms of the challenges we face on an ongoing basis and pivoting and doing what you've got to do to meet them. I think that that's a useful set of skills and kind of mindset to have right now.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's a story I teach in one of my university classes about pivots. And there's one about a a product called Q-Tol. Q-Tol came in a can at the turn of the last century, and it was white, and it was a white spongy substance, and it actually was used by people to clean the soot off the walls of their homes when we had gas lamps, and houses were lit by gas lamps. As people started to electrify their houses and gas lamps started to go out of business, Q-Tol suddenly became a business that didn't make sense anymore, except the wife of the founder thought that wasn't really true. She thought, this substance, which was non-toxic and sort of squishy and fun to use, could be turned into colors. And if you turned them into colors, you could give them the kids to play with. She was a preschool teacher. And suddenly Q-Tol, because of her thinking and her ability to connect this product with what she thought her students really liked, was rebranded Play-Doh and has been with us ever since, So yeah, the pivot, excuse me, is strong.
Yeah, very good. Oh, that's a fun story. That's a fun story. Okay, so you've written several articles about the importance of brand purpose, and that's what we're all about at PursePower. Could you please define it and tell us why you think it's so important right now?
Yeah, to me, brand purpose is a very different thing than corporate social responsibility, and I think we get those mixed up, right? Corporate social responsibility or social responsibility can be important. Having a cause can be important, but that's essentially, putting a line in the sand, writing a check, saying this is what we stand for. It's kind of easy in a way, right? And I don't necessarily mean easy in the way it happened at Patagonia, where they took their tax money and donated it to national parks, and that was a political stand. I don't necessarily mean that kind of thing isn't easy, but it's easy to support a cause. Mm-hmm. We all do that in our personal lives. Brand purpose to me is why someone chooses to do business with you rather than someone else. Mm-hmm. It's why you're more important to them than the vendor down the street. And it's not necessarily the obvious thing, or it doesn't necessarily rely in what you sell. So two stories, if I may, really quickly. The way I sort of first discovered this was when I got to this old house. It was an interesting place, fascinating, already iconic, obviously. It relied entirely on this idea that there were these really expert craftsmen who could do remodeling, and we watched them, and that was it. Started to think about, why do people watch this? Mm-hmm. I don't think it's just to see them hammer nails in, because at the end of every season or show, depending upon what version of this old house it was, there was a reveal. There was this place that was done. And I started to think about how, people like this brand, not because the process is really interesting, but it's the outcome to them that's important. And so we did some research, and we realized that the reason people were watching that television show or reading that magazine, the reason they were interested in home improvement wasn't because they wanted new countertops. It wasn't because they wanted a fresh coat of paint or a set of pillows on the sofa. It was because they were trying to create a safe place for their home, a safe home, right? A safe harbor for their family. They're trying to create a safe place for their family, or a physical manifestation who they thought they were. And when we realized that this was about something much deeper, this was about not just hammers and nails, it was about home, not houses, but home. Yeah. It suddenly opened up the brand to so many other opportunities. And I got a letter from a woman that made me realize this, right? We had started doing a reader remodel issue. And she wrote a letter to me saying, I feel like I know you guys, having read the magazine and watched the television show for so long, and I'm not in a position where I can do any remodeling myself anymore, but I still take a lot of comfort in seeing what you create and the people who live in them. Her name was Kathleen, and it turned out Catherine Stewart, and it turned out she had cancer, and that's why she couldn't remodel anymore. She was quite ill. She said, I wanted to send you this poem though about home. I thought you might appreciate it. So we printed her letter. We didn't mention she was ill, but we printed her letter and a photograph of the poem. And about a year went by. and I got a letter from a woman named Mary Seward. And it said, Scott, you might not have remembered, but about a year ago, my sister Catherine wrote you a letter. And she told me, Mary, that Catherine had died in the intervening year peacefully at home. And that she had taken out the page we had published with her poem on it whenever someone would come to visit. That to me was us identifying our brand purpose, right? That was when you get someone who's not only finds you so valuable while they're in the most difficult struggle of their life, but that their family wants to interact with you after the fact. That was identifying your brand purpose, that we were empowering people to think about that safe space of home, right? So I think that's what brand purpose is it's figuring out what is the deeper connection you have with people. That's why you exist. And I think, by the way, we have this as individuals. And I was reminded of this. I watched, and if any of you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch it. Carpool Karaoke with James Corden, right? Which you can find on YouTube. I saw one with Paul McCartney that was just amazing, where they went back to Liverpool together. So this is 50 years after Beatlemania, right? But they go on a tour of Liverpool, and Paul gets out of the car and he greets people at the barber shop. He goes to Penny Lane. He at one point, no one else around, he just sets down his hat in front of a bus stop and takes out a harmonica and starts busking. And at the end of the show, there's a screen in a pub, a big drop cloth in a pub at lunchtime that gets dropped, and all these people having their lunch in Liverpool suddenly see that Paul McCartney is standing there with a band, and they start playing. Most of the people in the pub having nothing to do with the Beatles 60 years earlier, 50 years earlier, right? No understanding of Beatlemania, but he starts playing music. People, everyone, all ages stand up. They're all totally into it. And you realize that, like, he may have been one of the, he was in one of the greatest bands to have ever existed. He may have been one of the greatest songwriters ever to existed. But the fact that he's doing this 50 some odd years later and doing it with remarkable enthusiasm told me, like, his brand purpose actually isn't music. It's to give people joy, right? Like, that was his underlying thread, the way a safe space was the This Old House underlying thread. And I think when you can tap into that suddenly, right, it's incredibly powerful. It's powerful for you as a person, and it helps clarify what you want to do and how well you do it. So I think brand purpose and personal purpose are sort of, two sides of the same coin, both incredibly powerful in business and your life when you can unlock them.
Yeah, absolutely. So my prior life was being an executive coach. It's kind of like the North Star you keep returning to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to give you a chance just briefly to talk about Inc.'s brand purpose, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and for us, it is understanding and empowering entrepreneurs. It isn't just to give them the information. It isn't just to present news to them about the PPP or how to do a pitch deck. It's actually a deeper level of emotional support, understanding how difficult the entrepreneurial journey can be, understanding how lonely it can be, understanding how frightening it can be to mortgage the house and put your family's future in jeopardy in pursuit of an idea that may or may not work out, to actually succeed and then not just worry about your family anymore, but worry about your employees and all their families and keeping them in a paycheck and keeping them in their homes. There's an incredible burden we shoulder as entrepreneurs. And I think Inc. exists to recognize that, to celebrate the successes, but to also acknowledge that it's really hard getting there, and to be there as a resource and a connector for people who are on that journey.
Outstanding. Thank you. All right. So if people aren't clear on their brand purpose, how do you think they could develop one? And what role does mission, vision, values play in it?
I think you have to, right, to me, you need to, and I've talked about this before, and everyone wants a really simple answer, the kind you'd read in, sort of the 150-page business book in the airport, right?
Sure.
And I think that's BS. There's not a simple answer. It takes work. It takes introspection. I think you have to step back from what you do and what you sell or what you make or what service you provide, and think about not just that your customer comes to you because you have the cheapest price or actually the best product, but what is the deeper level connection? What is beyond the obvious surface? On a personal level, what are the things that actually connected these set of circumstances to lead me where I am now? The common thread in that is that personal brand purpose, right? I think it takes a lot of work, frankly. It's a little bit of therapy, really. It's taking the time to be introspective and to ask yourself those questions, like, okay, I like this. This is the thrill part. Like, closing the sale is the thrill part, but like, what else happened in that close that was important, and why did that person say yes to me and not someone else? Where is that connection? And I think if you can discover that, that can be really powerful, because the thing that does, right, is that if your business right now crumbles, you can take that purpose and set up the next business. The company I used to work for was at one time the largest entertainment company, the largest media magazine company in the world. My immediate boss would often say to me, "We really don't know anything about TV. We're a magazine company." And that meant they were about printing words on paper. And when people stopped reading the way they used to, printed words on paper, the company didn't have a reason to exist. It didn't realize its brand purpose was deeper than that it could have been about information or entertainment or something more nuanced than that, right? But like on the base level, and iterate to the next platform. The way at this old house, we recognized it was about creating a safe space for people. And so we did that with television shows, we did that with magazines, we did that with books, we did that with live experiences, we did it with products and a whole bunch of other things, right? So once you discover your brand purpose, you're open to a lot more opportunity, right? Once upon a time, Kodak thought its brand purpose was to create film, to make film and produce pictures. They didn't realize, even though it was in their slogan, they didn't realize that it was really about the memories, and that the fact that they developed the digital sensor was lost on them, right? So they could still be a company that existed and capturing millions more people than they ever did printing pictures on paper. If they just understood their brand purpose was really about capturing moments for people, capturing memories for people, beyond just a marketing slogan, right? So it's deeper than that too. It's not just your marketing slogan, it's really why you exist.
Why you exist. Beyond that. Okay, I want people to think about questions. Go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll get to those in just a second. Given the challenging environment, the uncertainty of the future, how do we think about and reach our market during this difficult time?
I think, again, we have to think about that in a really non-transactional way. And again, it's an additional burden on a leader or an entrepreneur, but it's about, to me, it's about reaching out non-transactionally to see how people are, to see how, I don't want to make a sale, I'm just checking in to see how you are and how your business is, and if there's some other way I might be able to help you. Is there someone I can connect you with? I don't think that means you stop advertising, stop marketing yourself. And in fact, research shows that people will appreciate brands that continue to market them in a thoughtful way through a crisis more after the crisis is over, right? So I think you still do your traditional outreach. I think you might modify the message depending upon who you are. I don't think you have to go so far as to be maudlin. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but somewhere out there on YouTube, there's a quick cut of dozens of different commercials saying exactly the same cliched things around COVID and being here. So I don't think you have to fall into sort of the cliche, but you can acknowledge that you're a human being caring about other human beings right now, and that's it. And by the way, when the time is right, we're still here. or we hope to be here, or we're going to come back when the time is right. I think it's having much more human communication, non-transactional communication, sending an email out just to say, this is what's going on. Warby Parker was great at this before the COVID crisis, where I can remember one summer receiving an email from them that did not sell anything at all. They overtly sell anything. It was an email full of pictures of dogs wearing sunglasses. Now, they were all sunglasses that Warby Parker sold, but they weren't selling them to me actively, right? Mm-hmm. And it was delightful. It was fun to see, and it made me feel good about Warby Parker. And I think that is sort of a lesson, especially now, that we can have non-transactional communication that's really brand building and really builds a connection.
Right. Very good. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. First question. When you're sitting on your golden pond in 30 years, looking back on your life, what would you have to have happen for you to see your life as a life well lived? And this is from Gene Kelly.
I don't know that I'm going to make it through the weekend, so 30 years seems
a long time.
a long time, Gene. I think knowing that, this is one of the reasons I teach, right? Professors, unless you're tenured, I am not a tenured professor, aren't really paid. I think it's the fact that you may have affected someone's life in a positive way. Because at a certain point, the material things mean less to you. The business accomplishments sort of get lost in the mist of time. You're reading my bio today reminded me of things that I hadn't remembered, right? So I think the fact that you may have positively impacted someone's life, made things a little bit better for them in some way. It doesn't have to be a big way, right? It can be by selling them something that delighted them when they needed to be delighted. That's special, you know? So it doesn't have to be something significant, but the idea that you've sort of made a positive impact is pretty great, that you did no harm, right? We talk about Inc. at having the luxury of not having to publish sensational content. And we're really proud of not having to do that. And that, for example, is sort of something from the current role I hold that I'm proud of.
That is so important these days. We need more publications like yours. We really do. All right, Scott, what impact do you think online entrepreneurs like solopreneurs, bloggers, digital marketers are having on the idea and growth of entrepreneurship in general? And this is from Case Lane.
I think it's allowed for an opportunity for entrepreneurs to exist at a greater level, and to people who may have been shut out of it because of cost and commitment before. So some of the solopreneurs we talk about become solopreneurs because they're, stay-at-home moms or dads, but have some in-between time to start a business that suddenly starts rolling. I'm reminded of the company Brooklinen, which sells sheets and pillowcases and things like that. A young married couple staying in Las Vegas had the best night's sleep of their life. They went downstairs at the hotel and asked about the sheets. Could they buy them because they were in the hotel gift shop? And yes, they could for $1,000,
wow.
Which they thought was a little steep, as you suggest, Don. So they decided to find the original source for them, and they tracked the original source down, and they started selling them through Facebook on their own for about $400. Still a lot of money, but a lot less than $1,000.
Wow.
And in their first year of doing that, they made, as a sideline out of their apartment, they made $250,000 gross. The next year they made $5 million. The year after that, 15 million. And I stopped following them after that, but they continued to be successful. I think all of the digital tools have opened up entrepreneurship at a time when other things are actually pressures on entrepreneurship, right? Student debt, healthcare, all of those concerns push people into traditional jobs if they're available and take us out of entrepreneurship. And in actuality, though it doesn't feel like it, entrepreneurship has been in decline in the United States. I'm hoping digital tools, moments like this, will reverse that, because we all know that entrepreneurship is where the real growth opportunities are. Maybe this is how we get to a place where real real income starts to go up again, right?
Wow.
Because of entrepreneurship. At the same time, I don't think we have the luxury of thinking about ourselves only as digital businesses, only as brick and mortar businesses. Increasingly, consumers expect us to be everything, to sort of have a physical space, have a digital space, if we're talking about retail or something like that. And that's okay. I think we see, if we're smart, we see digital as a useful tool. And that's the tool I need right now, or it's the tool that's going to start my business. But it's not necessarily going to be my only tool. And because I'm smart, and because I know how to pivot, and because I know how to adapt, and all those other things entrepreneurs are, we're going to keep exploring what other tools there are as we move ahead.
Yeah, boy, I agree with you. I think there's going to be this rise in entrepreneurship. And to be quite honest, I think a lot of women are going to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Other questions, guys? I'm going to give you a minute. All right. Oh, here we go. All right. As a wellness coach, writer, and speaker, my passion is helping people and groups to create replenishing solutions for their health and well-being. What do you see as some of the biggest opportunities right now for those in the wellness industry?
So believe it or not, the prior business that I was a founder and that I hold IP for was a wellness business. And I think it's actually a really good time for wellness, because we're understanding, there are two ways to look at it, right? We know that for every dollar spent on a corporate level on wellness theoretically returns $6 of productivity. That's statistics that
Wow.
exist, that you can track down, that you can find, right? We also know that some of the most significant entrepreneurs that exist right now, whether it was Steve Jobs before he died, or Jeff Bezos now, they are meditators. They take time to do that because it not only relaxed them, but allowed them to clarify their thinking. I think at the same time, people are feeling so stressed in so many ways, and so many traditional outlets are locked off to us now, right? My son acknowledging that my bike was was my support thing. Before that, it was the gym, and if I didn't go to the gym, I was, sadly, I never got like the physical benefits out of going to the gym that I had hoped, but I got mental ones, right? I got mental benefits out of it. So, and I think we're in a place where, so people are more aware than ever that wellness and self-care is important, and so are more adaptable to a message. We have more tools to reach them this way now. We can have virtual classes. We can have augmented meditations the way Headspace or Calm or many others do. We can have fitness the way Mirror or Peloton provides it. And I think there's much more room in the space for other things like that. Some of that eventually will return to in-person opportunities. Some of it will be hybrid. And I think that's great too, because on the day when I can't get home from work, or get home from work in time to go to the gym or to go to a yoga class or whatever it is, I can do that in my bedroom. That's great. So I think wellness is a huge opportunity, and people are much more receptive to it now than they ever have been. And just to demystify it and make it easier, I think is important. One of the business I was involved in, I called it Augmented Meditation. Actually, what it was a very large, it actually, I'm not a part of the business anymore. And the idea was to create an LED wall. So it could have been a large wall, like in a fitness studio, or it could have been a small one that you would use at home that would use color therapy and sort of moving imagery. At the same time, a soundtrack played of sound healing and a guided meditation. So a world-class meditation person or yogi would take you through a guided meditation. And the idea was that the visuals would help people who can't just close their eyes and gently touch aside the thoughts that are intruding. It was a way of actually focusing on something that wasn't focusing, and allowed people to get into a meditative state faster, right? So the only reason I bring this up is by making wellness easier for people, which I think digital tools allow for, there's so much more opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. One more question. Anybody else? Well, I've got one while we're waiting here. All right. So given everything we've discussed, what are the top 3 actions you'd like our audience members to take after leaving the call today?
Yeah, I think they're not actions as some internal actions, right?
Okay.
I think one, I would encourage everyone to think about what their brand purpose is, and how if they don't have it, and there's really not reason to have it, it's a thing to discover, right? To spend some time trying to discover it. I think the second thing is to check in on the people who you work with if you haven't. And I suspect this audience is sophisticated enough to already be doing that, but there's so many people who don't. And I know that in sending emails individually to my staff in the evenings, just saying, how you doing? I know it's hard to be alone by yourself in an apartment in New York. And just want to make sure it's okay. Do you need a mental health day? Something like that. Not only makes a difference in the moment, but it builds a relationship that will serve you long-term. And the last is to remind yourself of how you got to where you are if your business is facing trouble right now, and most are, and what tools that got you to where you are can be used now to get you to the next place. Because if you had them before, you likely still have them, and it's just a matter of dusting them off, getting them out, and applying them to get past where we are.
What resources does Inc. have for this?
So I would encourage people to come and explore the Inc. website. We try and do a couple of different things, right? There's the immediate kind of stuff where we talk about safeguards on how to reopen your business if it has been closed, and what your employees might fear, what your customers might feel, and how to navigate that safely, how to make sure you're protected from a legal standpoint or an insurance sales point. There's practical information like that. We've done a lot around loan forgiveness, the PPP, the Stimulus Act, the CARES Act, all of those things. There's information still out there. There's money still available. There are grants still available to people, and we have a place where we track all of that stuff. So there's that practical stuff too. We have a webinar series called Real Talk, where we talk to significant entrepreneurs, people who have been successful, who I think are inspiring. And just hearing them and hearing how they got from one place to the other is really important. The last one I did was with Damon John, and he talked about how he's on Shark Tank now, founder of the clothing brand FUBU. But he talked about how in his mother's house in Hollis, Queens, 20 some odd years ago, he was renting out the top floors for people to live in. He had a basement full of sewing machines, and he was working 40 hours a week at Red Lobster, all in support of the FUBU business getting off the ground, right? And he had this understanding that he knew he couldn't do this forever, but he was going to give it a certain amount of time. And his story is so inspiring that he got to where he did, and to see that it was just like hustle that got him there is important. So we have lots of inspiring stories like that, from Rebecca Minkoff, from Kendra Scott, from Seth Godin, from Mark Cuban, and a lot of other people that I think are really worth listening to.
Absolutely. I found that story to be inspiring personally. It hit dead on what I needed to hear at that point in time. Yeah, great. It was great. Okay. Let's see here. At the end of the day, what would you like the people attending the call to have learned from you?
That I think that there are people out there who want to help, right? And I know that I know that my staff, I know that the Inc. brand wants to help. I suspect there are people just like us in your life too. And that when things get difficult, as I think they are for a lot of people right now, and I say that like, things are difficult for me at work. Things are difficult for me with my son. Things are difficult for me with my wife, right? I mean, it's all a hard time to make sure to seek out that help, because it exists. And the people who can offer help are often just as grateful as the people who receive it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. All right. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Excelsior, onward and upward. Tomorrow is not today. You know, I think that is the biggest thing for me, and something I've always reminded myself is that tomorrow can be a different day than today is. And so when things get really tough in business, when I've been unemployed, I've reminded myself of that. And it's tomorrow can be different from today.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. Well, thank you so much. You've been amazing. I couldn't believe my good fortune and that having you join us today. So thank you. Let's see here. I just want to let everybody know that next week we're going to have Camille Burns. She's the CEO of the International Women Presidents Organization. And if you haven't signed up for a directory listing on pursepower.com, love to have you do that. And then we also have a Google Chrome extension you can download and put on your Google Chrome browser that helps you find women-owned and women-led businesses to buy from. We want you to use your Purse Power directory to buy from women-owned and women-led companies. And then all of these messages are, thank you so much, Scott. Thank you. You're inspiring. Really, it's easy to pay attention to and very worthwhile being on the call today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody. One last comment. Purse Power, we have it. Let's use it. See you next Friday at 10 Central. Thank you. Bye, everyone.